Now we're on. Hi, Brother Bill. We're on Exodus 34. Sorry, it's still echoing to me up here a little bit.
Well, maybe he'll get to come when it's dark later.
Yeah. Well, we're reviewing again 34 is after Moses has came down off the mountain and the people have repented or relented. God has told them that he's going to give them a second chance. Basically, Moses interceded for them for that purpose. So here in 34, start at verse 1, it says, "The Lord said unto Moses, Hew thee 2 tables of stones like unto the first, and I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables which thou breakest. And be ready in the morning, and come up in the morning unto Mount Sinai, and present thyself there to me in the top of the mount. And no man shall come up with thee, neither let any man be seen throughout all the mount, neither let the flocks nor herds feed before that mount. And he hewed 2 tables of stone like unto the first. And Moses rose up early in the morning, and went up into Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hands the 2 tables of stone." One of the things that I found kind of interesting in this and the other, kind of putting the two together, and we don't have all the information, okay? We have what's said here. As I've been studying another book that I've got that I've been reading, and it's going through the first 10 chapters, I think, of Genesis, and we might do that next or do that sometime in the future. But it's really good. But the guy hits on just read what's there and interpret what's there. I mean, don't interpret, use your mind to make sure that's what was said and nothing more. As far as you can conjecture a lot of things. You can make up a lot of things, assume a lot of things. But if you take it as it is, read it and go from there. As far as if it says it here, then that's what it means. So I'm going to do the opposite right now. No, not really. I'm just saying it seems to me we didn't, God's came down, he told Moses, go ahead and cut 2 more stones and bring up to the mountain. I'm going to rewrite the letters. It didn't say anywhere in there that God was mad at Moses for throwing those down and breaking them or anything like that. But God didn't tell Moses to throw them down either. We see both sides of the story. Moses acted upon his interest, on his own, and with his fury. So we see God is recognizing Moses' temper a little bit. He said, okay, I'll fix this. You go get 2 more stones and I'll write them down again and we can do all this over again. And Moses is like, I would be like, oh no, another 40 days. I mean, that was kind of what it would be like to me, seems like. But we do see that Moses, he had broke those stones and had all the commandments written on them and all the different things that was there. And God told him, go ahead and do it again. I'll write them after this because, the people, they had a great sin when they went. They basically broke the rules for even, 40 days was up, a month and a half. They had already given up on seeing Moses again. Again, he tells them, don't let anybody come up. This time it doesn't say that Joshua went with him. Yeah. We don't know if he did or not, but he said, let no man come up. So here again, if he's saying that, that means Joshua too. One reason I think he did that, Joshua's over now in the tabernacle, in the temporary, transitory, we was talking about that earlier, transitory tabernacle. It hadn't been built yet, but he was using Moses' temple. So Joshua Joshua was over there taking care of that. So it said in verse 5, and the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord, and the Lord passed by before him. Now see, this, I kind of think this was, for last time God told him he was wanting to see God. He was wanting to experience God. So I think this is all part of that. Because here, the first time when Moses came down, it didn't say anything about his radiance or being able to look upon him, not look upon him. As we get to the end of this chapter, that's what happens. He is in closer proximity to God this time because the radiance of God comes upon Moses and he has to wear a veil a little bit later on.
You know, you could think God's holiness is so bright anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like when you go out in the sun, sometimes the sun's so bright, you don't see the sun.
That's right.
I mean, because it blinds you.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And here, you know, again, Moses didn't see God face to face, but all his, I mean, some of his glory, he couldn't hardly, you know.
And we don't know how that's represented. I mean, we see the fire, we see the cloud, and we see the lightnings going on, all that. The first time he may have been right there above Moses, and in the cloud where he couldn't see him. We don't know. But he was talking to Moses back and forth. The people heard God the first time, you know, when they talked. Not the whole thing, but just that one section when God was talking to the people. But here it says this cloud, and it's not mentioned before, so I don't know if it's different or not, but it says this cloud of glory is known as the Shekinah. It's covered Mount Sinai. Now here it says Exodus 19:16, so that would have been the first time. It went with Israel by day. It stood at the tent of Moses, the temporary tabernacle. We read about it last week. It filled Solomon's temple with glory. A little later on, it overshadowed Mary at the conception of Jesus. It was present at the transfiguration of Jesus, and it will be present at the return of Jesus. So in the Shekinah, it missed where it goes into the tabernacle when they actually get the tabernacle set up and the Ark of the Covenant set up. The Shekinah glory comes and settles on the Ark. It doesn't mention that there. But it said that all this, some way, we don't know how, God appeared to Moses in the cloud at Sinai. Last week it said he wanted to know, please show me your glory. He said, you cannot see my face because you'll die, because we can't stand. We could not see his purity, his mercy, all that he is. It would just kill us. It would just wipe our physical bodies. Now, when we become a spiritual being, then we'll be able to see him as he is. And Paul and John and Daniel and Ezekiel, they all talked about the visions that they saw and tried to describe some of the holiness that was there. And there's just, as John said, he just fell down. He just was so awed that that's right. They were just, it was something that the human nature, human physical body can't interpret, can't handle. But yet, we go back, as your message said, to Adam, and he walked with God. He walked with him daily. So we don't know, that's the difference between the sinful body that we have now and the body that Adam and Eve had original before the sin, before the fall.
His body went from infinite, I mean, yeah, to finite, because the tree of life was there.
That's right.
Man.
They were kicked out, and they changed. When they did that, they knew they sinned, and they changed. Their bodies somehow, started to die. It became a physical body, I think, then. Now, was it a physical body before? Yeah, I think it was. But it changed. That somehow changed it. I think he had the immortal body before. That's what I would get. Like God wanted us to have in the very beginning and in the very ending, how we will have. So the name of the Lord was proclaimed. It says this means God's revealed his character to Moses. The specific aspects of his character are mentioned in the passage. Yet this was far more than a lecture on the nature of God. Moses experienced the character of God in a dramatic way. And the Lord passed by Moses, it said in Exodus 33:21 and 23. Hidden in the cleft of the rock, Moses saw behind the Lord as much of God's glory as he could possibly take in or handle. So that's, something that's different than what it was last time. Moses asked for that in between, as he's coming back up the second time. So the second part of 6 and going on to 7. And proclaim the Lord God merciful and gracious, long-suffering, abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the children's children, and to the third and the fourth generations.
This was God speaking.
This was God telling him, and Moses writing down, trying to describe what he saw. God is expressing himself, showing himself. That's why he wanted to see God, and this is the way that it was expressed to us. So we can kind of interpret. It's, by no means incorporates that at all, but he, like you said, proclaimed himself to Moses. It was proclaimed to him. And it talks about the Lord, and the name that we've talked about before, Yahweh, or the symbol YHWH, expresses all that he is and he does. It's the I am that he said very back of when the burning bush was there. Go tell him who is God, what is his name, and he says I am. That's what Yahweh means, or YHWH. It's I am, basically everything. Knowing God should be the active interest of every human being, and especially of every Christian. It has been said by someone, the proper study of a mankind is man. I will not oppose the idea, but I believe it's equally true that the proper study of God's elect is God. The proper study of a Christian is the Godhead. The highest science, the loftiest speculation, the mightiest philosophy which can ever engage the attention of a child of God is the name, the nature, the person, the work, the doings, and the existence of the great God whom he calls his Father. That's just, here again, Spurgeon trying to represent a little bit of what Moses saw. And it goes about into all the different descriptions: his mercifulness, his kindness, his gracious, long-suffering, all those things. We're not going to go through all those tonight, but you can read about that. And we can see that today because he is, we saw what has happened through history time and time and time again when the people turned their back on him, yet God is still gracious and merciful and long-suffering, of wanting, if he wanted to, just like he did with Noah, he could wipe everybody out with the flood, just like he did at Sodom and Gomorrah. He could wipe the entire planet again if he wanted to. But his purpose was to try to save people. In Noah's days, it got so bad, only 8 people in the entire world would acknowledge God as far as a supreme being. I don't know how many thousands or 100,000s or million, I don't know how many people was there at the approximate time, but that's pretty scary. That we need, we said, I think today it's getting closer and closer to that. There sure doesn't seem to be very many people. You read some of the things.
Most of these guys are kin to one. I mean, look, this
Oh yeah, yeah.
came from those 8 guys, and I mean, you
Yep.
know, I mean, they came from
Adam and Eve. It had grown exponentially. There's been some people said there's several million people on the earth at that time, and there may have been. When you live 900 years, you could have probably 900 kids. I mean, maybe not, maybe 800, but you have all them kids. I mean, it grew pretty rapidly. Cut off in there somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be something.
We don't know. That's one of that.
Sarah were not quite 100, and
Yeah.
they were like already.
They were old. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but then it said that Abraham, after Sarah died, he married again. And
Yeah, he had several others. Yeah, some more after that. I don't know why he was so crazy, but he was.
Most kids I've known that family to have, and my daughter's great grandmother had 21, all hers.
Well, they had
wow.
the one lady. I think the record is she had 60 plus kids. I think I've heard that before. And she had like 2 or 3 sets of twins and triplets and things like that. And I don't know how many actually lived. I think that's what I read. And
I remember when we were in 9th grade, we had a breeder. This lady was there on their 25th wedding anniversary. She gave birth to their 24th kid. And she was holding them, and they were standing in the staircase.
oh yeah.
And I'll never forget, I'm thinking, wow. And that was, back in my grandparents, a lot of times they die and remarry,
Oh,
and
yeah.
be 2 or 3, maybe a couple of fathers,
Sets
a
of
couple of
them,
mothers, but that was
yeah.
all
Yeah.
the Beasleys, Fred Beasley, and there's I think 20-something for their family or
Wow.
apart.
Well, that's true.
I mean, doing the history, the genealogy that I've been doing here recently on mine, 7 to 12 kids is not unusual. You go back a couple of generations. I mean, it seems like, at least in my
Well, they had
family,
kids till they couldn't have kids.
they had kids, because those kids was the ones that helped them with the older kids helped with the younger kids, and then once they got older, they worked them hard.
Well, they lived on the farm, they didn't need any hands because they had them all.
Well, they needed a few to get started, but
Yeah.
it grew as they went. Yeah, that's right. In verse 8, and Moses made haste and bowed his head toward the earth and worshipped. And he said, if I now have found grace in thy sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray thee, go among us, for it is a stiff-necked people, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for thine inheritance. This goes back to previously when he said he's not going to be with them again. He's going to stand apart, is kind of what it said. Up until this time, he's been leading them kind of from within the group. But now, since the people had run, did the idolatry and all that, he was going to set himself, not going to leave them, but he was going to set himself apart from them. Now Moses is asking him to reinstate that, to go back and let that sin not, stand in the way. He wants the people, in my opinion, he's seeing what he saw. If the people would see what he saw, they would not go back and do that again. But we see they did anyway. Verse 10, and he said, behold, I will make a covenant before all thy people. I will do marvels, such as have not been done in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among which thou art shall see the work of the Lord. For it is a terrible thing that I will do with thee. Observe thou that which I command thee this day. Behold, I drive out before thee the Amorite, the Canaanite, Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. So we see that he is telling them he's going to be with them. He is still going to drive the people out of the promised land that he's given them already, and that he will help them. Okay? stipulation to that. It's implied here, you still have to follow me. Later on, they don't even follow that. When he tells them to go over here and do this, they still won't do that. He wanted to drive them out to keep them pure, to not let that idolatry of all the other nations to get back in on it. And we see that that's what happened. They would go outside and marry some of those that were still left. And as they came in, they brought their doctrines and their gods and all that back in. Solomon had so many wives he married to make unions with the different countries around him so he could make peace. But in doing that, he would bring in foreigners, basically, foreign wives, and they would bring their religion with them, their gods with them, and he would let that happen. Solomon let that happen.
Well, I like that where it said, I'll make a covenant, and over the years, a lot of people say, well, covenant's like a contract. No,
No.
a contract is where I decide and you decide and we
Right.
come together. A covenant with God is God sets all the stipulations, sets all the rules, and you either accept it or you reject it.
Let's go back to Abraham, when he sat back in Abraham, the covenant with Abraham. Abraham didn't have anything to do with it. He just said, you pass between these, and he did it. But God brought the animals, he did the slaughter, he did all these things. It was a vision that he had. And he told them, I'm going to do marvels, which we could see the miracles. He's already done that. He did it for them as they were coming out of Egypt. So God promised to do what Israel could not do by itself, drive out the nations of Canaan. So this would allow Israel to take possession of what God had given them. Verse 12, take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, whither thou goest, lest it be a snare in the midst of thee. But he shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. For thou shalt worship no other gods, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after their gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods. And one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. And thou take of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters go whoring after their gods, and make thy sons go whoring after their gods. So we see that that's the main purpose. He said, I'm going to drive these people out because you need to marry somebody that has the same religion as far as the monotheistic, the one God, the only God, which the Jewish people at that time was the only one that had that, the true God, what we would say the true God. There are other gods out there.
You think this is almost like, to us, it's spiritual? In other words, we're not to let anything interfere in our relationship with Christ. Anything that, all those strongholds that, or all those things under that we used to do, that used to keep us from God and from our relationship, we need to get rid of those things.
That's right. And it's anything that we do. Today, it seems to be time. We never have enough time to do. We go think back when I was young, we had revivals that was week long, 2 weeks long, or whatever, and we had Sunday morning service, Sunday night service, we had Tuesday night Bible study, we had Wednesday night youth study, and sometimes they'd have another study on Friday night and Sunday again. And then when you didn't have all that, you had revivals in between. We was going to church all the time, seemed like. Well, we didn't have a whole lot. Television, yeah, there was television, but we had 3 channels and it went off at midnight, and all this good stuff. And before that is even, didn't have that. They had the radio. So it's whatever you take, and if that's all you do, that's taking time away from God, where we have that today too. We may not call that an idol, but it is. I mean, we think that's more important than doing what we need to do for God. And that's where we fall, we let ourselves be pulled away. Because what is it the kids want to do today? If somebody gets $100 pair of tennis shoes, they want a $100 pair of tennis shoes. That's like, if I got a cut in my pants, I was wanting a new pair of pants. Today, that's the style. They have their cut up and down and all over stuff. And it's just, yeah.
I'll tell you what, if I'd saved money for those jeans when I was a kid, I'd be rich.
Oh, you'd be totally rich. I mean, I can remember Mom saying for Christmas, Grandma would go down and get the boys, I think, a couple of pair of jeans for Christmas or their birthday or whatever, and they'd have to put it on layaway and then pay for it as they could get it. And that did them for the year. They had 2 pairs of jeans for the whole year.
Well, I remember as a kid having those Arnold patches, then
sew
around it,
yeah.
Your jeans will be wearing out a little bit, but you need to have them to go.
Iron-on patches and sewed them on. That's right.
And then you socks.
Yep. Well, they didn't need socks. They ran around without shoes and everything else is what I saw in my dad's pictures and those. I don't know when they ever had socks on nor shoes.
Nowadays it don't matter if you don't wear socks or not.
Verse 17, thou shalt make thee no molten gods. Now he's just kind of starting to re-emphasize what they missed out on the first time. I mean, it's like, if you didn't get this, this is what this means. Verse 18, the feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread as I commanded thee in the time of the month of Abib, for in the month of Abib thou camest out from Egypt. This is one of the first festivals that they'd set up. It was the time of Passover, the time that they left Egypt. Here again, it's only been a few months, maybe up to 6 months, I think. But it's wanting them to have a remembrance. And again, the unleavened bread, leaven is representing sin. It's a symbol of sin. And if they clean all that out before that feast comes about, they are purifying themselves for 7 days for the feast. They keep that 7 days as they're going into the Passover.
Lord Jesus said a little leaven.
Leaven at the whole lump. So 19 through 26 gives some various other laws to separate, to make them different from the nations around them. All that openeth that matrix is mine, and every firstling among thy cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male. But the firstling of an ass thou shalt redeem with the land. And if thou shalt redeem him not, then shalt thou break his neck. All the firstborn of thy sons thou shalt redeem, and none shall appear before me empty. 6 days thou shalt work, but on the 7th day thou shalt rest. In earing time and in the harvest thou shalt rest. And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. Thrice in the year shall all your men, children, appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. For I will cast out the nations before thee, enlarge thy borders, neither shall any man desire thy land, when thou goest up to appear before the Lord thy God thrice in the year. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, neither shall the sacrifice in the feast of the Passover be left unto the morning. The first of the firstfruits of thy land shalt thou bring unto the house of the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk. This is the cliff notes of the kind of the 10 Commandments and the laws that we had previously in chapter 20, in the chapter 20s in there where he gave it. So they have to redeem their firstborn. They have to give them to God, basically. And by doing that, we've gone over it before, but they can redeem it with a certain offering. If it's a ram or a goat, sheep, or if you're not wealthy enough, it goes back and says you can do it with some turtle doves. So all these things, and to remember 6 days. You work 6 days, and the 7th day you rest. It's remembering God's time.
What about the one where it said breakage? What is it there?
If you don't redeem it.
Yeah,
Verse 20.
that's a very, that's a redeemer with the lamb. The firstling of an ass,
Mm-hmm.
that's a redeemer of the lamb. If you know, redeem it not, that shall break its neck.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what the difference. I mean, I don't know why that is pointed out as far as specific for that one. If it's for all those like that, in me, it's saying you might as well kill it because if it's not serving me, it's not going to be worth anything. I mean, that's kind of what it's saying to me. But I don't know if there has a specific meaning on that or not. I didn't look that up to see. See if I can find out some more of that for next week. But it goes back that they have to set aside the first for the best for God. That's what they're saying.
And a lot of these had to do with their, it talks about Exodus there where thou shalt not boil a young goat in its mother's milk. It's, in other words, the Canaanites and a lot of these, they did this kind of stuff, and God wanted them separated from that stuff.
Right. They did it for a purpose. It was one of their fertility rites or some other rite that they went about that their God required. So he's setting these up to do that. That you are to be separate. You can't do these things. Because I don't know what it is in man, but it's like if somebody else does it, well, it must be okay, so I can do it. Or I want to be like them. I want to be like the next door neighbor. I want a bigger boat, bigger house, bigger whatever. I don't know what it is in man. It is. Seems like. But God is saying that that's, you need to turn all this over to God.
And that, I think, because we're created in the image and likeness of God, there's something in us that has to worship a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not willing to say it's God, the world, and so they
fill it with everything else.
Everything else, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whether it's whatever, name your poison, basically. Hunting, whatever. Work, sports, anything. So, one of the things that here it tells it that, and we hear again in the New Testament, 3 times all your men shall go appear before the Lord. This is not even, and this is set up, these 3 feasts that they have, they don't even have a tabernacle yet, but they're still setting it up that you need to go before the Lord. Jesus' day, we see that. That's when he was 12 and he traveled to Jerusalem as the feast was getting ready to take place. That's one of the feasts that they had. And then after that, it's saying the feast takes a little while. You're going to be gone a little period of time. The people aren't going to try to come and get your land while you're gone, because they had to travel for a little distance. God's going to put that fear in the people that nobody else is going to try to move in, because they are doing this for God. So God is watching over their land or watching over their people. Shall take care of their land.
Well, it looked like that both times on the mountain, Moses didn't sleep very much.
No, he didn't. It was supernatural. I mean, just think of it. We don't, it's not said, but we don't see it where he had any water or had any food for 40 days and 40 nights. That's impossible for man. 3 days and you'll die without water. I mean, you may go 4, but your system just starts shutting down if you don't have water. Food, you can go longer than that, of course, but you got to have some water. And even some of the longest fasts, 40 days is a pretty long time for a fast. But that sun's going to kill me. Poking right in there. Oh, scoot over there. Oh, that makes it worse. Go the other direction here. Get behind it. So, but yeah, that's going to be hard. But it was a miracle that it happened once and then it happened right again. And I'm here again. I'm on Moses. Oh man, but it wasn't that way. We look at it as a a person is like, man, I'm not going to get to eat for another 40 days. He was in the presence of God, and that 40 days passed.
Yeah, that
Like,
is a big difference.
yeah.
When the Spirit's moving and you're in the presence of the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost is moving,
you don't
want to go and leave that service.
That's right. That's right. And that's what happened with him.
Yeah.
That for 40 days, he wasn't counting the days and nights, and he didn't, in my opinion, he didn't even know, because the cloud was up on and the Shekinah glories there, so he had light for the 40 days and 40 nights. He didn't know if it was day or night or what was going on, but he was just in that presence and reveling in what God was telling him, and so enthused, like I said, seeing this glory and hearing from God what he wanted of his people to do, that it just sustained him for that time. So verse 27 says, And the Lord said unto Moses, Write thou these words, for after the tenor of these words I have made a covenant with thee and with Israel. And he was there with the Lord 40 days, 40 nights. He neither eat bread nor drink water. I said it wasn't there, but it is there. It says, And he wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. So one place it says that God wrote it, and I think he did. I think that was the 2 tables of stones. Then he had to write down all these other commandments that God gave him. So Moses wrote those down, I think. It's the way I envision that in my mind. So it's impossible to exaggerate the stupendous things suggested in this simple statement, but it was powerful evidence of the truth that man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So that's how he was being sustained. That's what Jesus did, when he was talking to the Samaritan woman. That, he was talking, and I have to be about my master's business, and I have to do these things. And he's like, what's going on? Where did you get this? And another place where he had to, they asked him if who's been eating or something like that. And he, no, I'm doing my Father's business. I'm eating bread and drinking water that you don't know of.
Yeah, I have meat and drink that you know not of.
Right. So it says he wrote on the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. These tablets are the ones that were actually eventually placed in the ark when the ark was made, when they made the ark up. Verse 29 through 30 says, And it came to pass when Moses came down from Mount Sinai after the 40 days, with the 2 tablets of testimony in Moses' hand, when he came down from the mount, that Moses was not the skin of his face shone while he talked with them. And when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come nigh him. So as he came down, he didn't even know himself, said that his face was shining upon them. The people were scared. So as they came down, if you've seen somebody, that one movie, which one was it? Marvel movie, where the Captain Marvel, where the one guy says, you're glowing, aren't you? I can kind of envision that. He's kind of stand backish. You're kind of glowing. Yeah. In this particular phase, he didn't know he was glowing, and that that Shekinah had stayed on him.
Well, there they mentioned about you'd think after fasting 40 days and 40 nights, it would be.
Oh yeah,
I think Mark Green fasted 40, and he lost about 40% of his body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
Yeah, you would think you would look really poor and really, harrowed, but here again, you're taking in what God gave you, which is he sustained him for that certain period of time. It's a truth that a life lived with God affects the physical appearance, especially the face. The peace of God, the joy, love, peace, and goodness should be evident on the face of one who follows Jesus. Yet what Moses experienced seems beyond that general principle, and a direct result of his remarkable communication with God. And it had to be more than that. We don't see that again that we know of. Now, you'll look at some of the paintings that some of the older uh, Dark Ages wrote, and they would show around certain people. They do that around the saints. They put that little halo and all these different things. I think that's a representation. They were trying to represent that glory, that person in living, that radiance that they had from God that was upon them. This radiance, what I like here, it says, was reflected radiance. It wasn't from Moses, it was from God. The source was the face of God, and Moses communicated so directly with God, he received some of this glory. The face of Moses shone because he had long looked upon the face of God. And that's like, well, we spend 5 minutes with God, and we think, okay, why is my face not shining? How about 40 days and 40 nights? That's going to get you there. It's 5-10 minutes ain't going to do it. It says, wonderfully, Moses did not know that his face. He was unaware of the greatness of his own radiance. This was because Moses was genuinely and deeply humble man. Directly, people become conscious of their superiority to others and boast of it. It's certain that they had never really seen the beauty of God's holiness and no clear knowledge of the conditions of their own heart. Sometimes you see these people, and here I don't want to categorize people, but there are certain people that they're smart and they let you know they're smart. And then there's some
There's a
people.
word for that, but we won't say it.
Yeah, well, and then there's some people that just by talking with them, you can tell they're one of the sharper tacks in the play, but they don't tout it, and that's what it is. What's the old saying? Better to say nothing and to be to say something stupid and then prove yourself that you are stupid.
Yeah, don't stick
That's
that.
basically what it is. Yep, that's right. Verse 31, and Moses called unto them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned unto him, and Moses talked with them. And afterward all the children of Israel came nigh, and he gave them in commandment all that the Lord had spoken with him in Mount Sinai. He had to call them. He had to tell them basically who he was. That they thought, well, they saw this person coming down, and they thought it was Moses, but boy, this is something different with this glowing and this Shekinah. So he had to actually call them back and in my mind, reinforce them that this is Moses and I've been talking to God. So finally, they kind of told him, well, you're kind of scary. We don't know if we want to get too close to you or not. Said, until Moses had done speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But when Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he took the veil off until he came out. And he came out, spake unto the children of Israel that which was commanded. And the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone. And Moses put the veil upon his face again until he went in to speak with him. So this was I don't know how long it lasted. I don't think it said. Some of them think that it went on, for a long time, and some of them don't. But people were just afraid that he had been in the presence of God and seen God, that would, I don't know, that they were just scared of him, it seemed like, for some reason.
Well, what I was thinking when I was a kid growing up, I've had men of God, but pastors. If I've been out doing something wrong, I didn't want to be around.
Yeah.
Because they were getting God.
Deserving of it, they were deserving of the Spirit. I mean,
Yep.
I think a lot of times they just felt something, and if they talk long enough, it's like I said, my dad sometimes would just look at me like, after a while, okay, Dad, I know you know.
Yeah, you start confessing before anything comes up, and like, you have that guilty look on you.
My uncle used to line the kids up and say, okay, you're all gonna get it until somebody confesses. Well, none that didn't do it, well, they were ready to tell them what did.
That's right, that's right.
Well, Brother Emerson's mother used to call, and she would say, well, how are y'all doing? I've been thinking about y'all and praying for you. And I said, one time I said, well, okay, it must be because such and such and such.
Right.
You know, I knew when she'd call. She had been hearing from God,
Right.
you know, and she
Right.
would just call and say, how is things going, you know? I've been praying for you.
There have been things like that. I think many people have, God moves upon people to, won't you give this person a call, or won't you check on them, or won't you do this, or won't you do that?
But you know what, God still talks to people.
He does.
I mean, a lot of people don't believe that. I mean, and now God's never talked to me in a audible voice,
Right.
But there's been times He's talked to me in my spirit, and it was just like He was talking to me in an audible voice. And there's other times God's moved on me, like used to when I was working construction, and sometimes we'd be out laying rock, and man, a sense of the Spirit would move on me, and I felt a sense of the need to pray, and I have taken a bucket, one of those 5-gallon, one corner of the house in there, and made me an altar and begin to pray. And sometimes maybe somebody would testify about, I was moving, I'm thinking, other times I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know God does.
Yeah. He knows what somebody needs, and here again, sometimes I struggle with that a little bit, because God moves upon me. I pray for somebody. When I was real young, I did that. I went up and told them, well, I've been praying for you. And they just kind of blew it off. And that kind of made me sad. And since then, I've kind of been a little bit, I'll still pray for people and things like that, but I'm probably not going to tell you that I did unless God tells me to tell you. Because it's just like, to me, it's like being proud almost that I did something for you, and I'm not looking for that. God moved upon to do something for you, and it may not be praying, maybe calling you, maybe doing anything just to check on you. But I mean, he's moving on us for a purpose, to do something, and as long as we remember whatever they ask us to do, he asks us to do.
Well, I tell you this, and I feel this, and I don't know how much longer that I'll be, you know what I mean, in this world, okay? Because I know I'm not a kid anymore. But I want to tell you, it's going to get to the place that we need that. We need it now.
Yeah, we do.
But we need people sensitive to the Spirit to pray, and we may never know it physically.
Right.
But we'll know it spiritually that
Right.
somebody's been praying
Somebody's
for
been
us
visiting, yeah.
and got a hold of God.
That's right.
Well, Charlie Cook had told me about one of the times when he was in World War II that he had got down underneath a tree while everything was going on. But anyhow, an action California moved, and a shell hit that tree, and he found out that, I don't remember if it was his mother or who had been praying for him at that time, and the Lord moved upon him. It was time for him to move from that position. Like I said, an artillery shell took that whole area out.
God is watching out for us. I mean, if we are he will help us with certain things.
He can wake us up at times and tell us we need to be praying when we don't even know what it's for.
Right.
We may find out later on in that day, or
I've even had times where, something happened and, oh, crud, I'm going to be late. So, I had to go back and do that, and then later on, Darla called and said, well, there's a big wreck after that, did you see it? No, I didn't see it. It must have happened after I gone by or something like that. You don't know what may, is happening. God is watching out for us, and we may never know. I'm pretty sure we won't know everything till we get there of how God has been protecting us and watching over us in our times.
well, that's where we may testify and praise on where the Lord saved us from the wreck and one thing like that. But we've got to praise Him at all times for
That's
the
right.
things that we never know that kept
Yes,
us from.
yes,
I mean, that He is there with us at all times.
all times.
You know, I thank God for His sovereignty, because I mean, you know, He does what He wants to do when He wants to do it. But,
Right.
at the same, you know, we know what's going to happen. Okay, we know what's going to happen. If you're a Christian and you will read the Bible, you know what's going to happen. But anytime, that still never exempts us from doing what we know to do.
Right.
You know, people are going to be lost, but people are going to be saved too.
Mm-hmm.
And our responsibility is not try to pick the ones who's going to be lost or who's going to be saved, but pray therefore to the Lord of the harvest that He would send workers into the field, and that we would, you know.
I mean, if we look at it from God's side, God already knew what was going on. It's like, why am I even messing with this people? You know, it just, I could do something else, go do something better with my time.
I know, well, you made it about Moses coming down, and
Oh yeah.
there's times when I got through with a sermon, and I was up for 2 times in my ministry I did it. And usually things don't bother me, but it seemed like everybody's mind was somewhere else, and man, I was struggling. You do that sometimes.
Sure.
So, 2 times I just closed my Bible and said, well, let's stand and pray.
Mm-hmm.
And on the way out the door, somebody said, well, glad you ended that. But you know, I mean, we're human beings, and sometimes, like you said,
Yeah.
if you've been up fasting for 40 days and come down and these guys were having a party.
That's right. That's right.
I think God leads us into things too. And I say that because I use Brother Everson for an example. When Debbie passed away, and Brother Everson wasn't the first choice to do her service.
Mm-hmm.
Another minister was, but her minister Mike was not available, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so James was prompted by God to ask Brother Everson to do it. Okay, there was a reason for that. You know, there was. Or
Sure.
Mike would have been able to be there and do it.
Sure.
See?
Sure.
And so I think God leads us also.
Oh yeah, He does. He does.
He prompted me to call James today too.
We will see you guys Sunday. Bring your eggs and get ready to hunt.